and welcome to this video. My name's Danny, and today I'm going to be diving through what I would do if I was a student in 2022 to become a DevOps engineer. So in my role at the moment, I'm a DevSecOps engineer, and I work within the TV and media space at the moment to help them with DevSecOps. Let's put this a bit closer, maybe you can hear me a bit better, right? Okay, let's see what's going on here, because I've got some weird funkiness going on with this microphone for some reason, and it seems to like recording in one ear, and I don't know why. It's that Sennheiser one, but yeah. Right, so the first thing that you want to have a look at is which companies are you applying to, right? When you go out into the world, you have a lot of different companies. And one of the things that kind of caught me off guard when I was kind of looking into companies was I was thinking small companies would be more beneficial than larger ones. Now, this isn't the case when you leave university. The reason why is because you don't have a lot of skill at this moment in time to go and do that sort of level of work, because that's a very senior level of work. And a lot of companies, what they'll do is they'll try and entice you in by saying, we have a really good incentive to have you here because we can train you. But they don't really have the staff or the manpower to really train you at that point. You have to be pretty good at that point already to be working into a small company, right? Because it's a small team. And that's the problem, you see. So that's a little bit of a bummer. But the cool thing is, though, that there are a lot of large companies that have graduate schemes, right? So the one thing that you can do is you can get onto the graduate scheme. In fact, let's put that on here. And we'll put that in just underneath enthusiasm. Okay. So with the graduate scheme, what you can do is you can get into different companies that have graduate schemes, like technical companies, fan companies. They all have different schemes, right? So when you get into a graduate scheme, one of the things that they'll try and make you do is they'll probably make you do a task. They might make you do a series of challenges, for example, maybe even a coding challenge, that sort of thing. And that's there to kind of gauge your level of enthusiasm. Now, it all stems down to your enthusiasm levels, right? If you're enthusiastic about doing your kind of like your networking, for example, like I am, I'm quite passionate about networking. I also like DevOps as well, right? Then you can you can get quite far, because they'll see that when they do your analysis. And what I mean by that is that where I work, they give you a sheet, you fill in the sheet, and you say, for example, where do you see media going in the next 5 years, for example? That's one of the questions. And a lot of people, they say things like VR, right? Things like virtual reality, things like the metaverse, that sort of thing. And that's not a bad thing, but if you can say kind of the implications of that, for example, that's more likely to land you a job than saying, the metaverse, because X, Y, Z. So you kind of have a little bit of a research, like a little bit of a clue and enthusiasm about kind of what it is that you're researching. So for example, metaverse, why is that important to things like the media and TV industry, for example? So that's the sort of thing that you need to be thinking about when applying for these grad schemes. Like if you're applying for IBM, for example, great bunch of guys. You could say in their sort of graduate scheme, why do you want to apply for IBM? Because they've done a lot of things with AI with Watson, for example. I know a lot of the different companies have, for example, Google with DeepMind. They've got some really good stuff going on there with DeepMind at the moment. I believe they've even had Lambda, something called Lambda, which is their really cool kind of experimental AI platform, which has been touted as being sentient. But there's debate around that, and there's a lot of kind of controversy around that sort of subject. But but nonetheless, it's a really cool project, even in that space, because in order to even think that this particular artificial intelligence is sentient requires a lot of programming and a lot of thought to try and emulate the particular nuances that a human would have in order to make it think it was human. So there's a lot of praise to be had there. So that's the sort of thing, that level of enthusiasm to say, right, I've seen this thing, it looks really cool, and I want in on that, right? That's the sort of thing that you need to be thinking in the back of your head when back of your mind, I mean, when you try and apply for these graduate schemes. So it's a really good trait to have. So on top of that, what you can do is you can go to these meetups as well. Now, meetups are essential part of your development, I would say, especially as a graduate that's just come out of university. And the reason being is because at that point, it shows that you have a level of enthusiasm which puts you above some of the other candidates which are applying for the same role. Right? Even the people that are kind of, had a bit of experience, because it shows that you have an interest and it shows that you have a passion for it. Right? So, for example, there was one just the other day at London DevOps. Again, great bunch of people. And in there, they have technical recruiters. Now, the technical recruiters that are there at these meetups, it depends which ones you get. Some of them are hits, some of them are a bit of a miss. Now, what I mean by that is that if you go to a corporate event like of a meetup, so for example, with London DevOps, it was AWS, you can get in touch with some great recruiters that will help you out with every leg of the journey in terms of the application process. So what happens there is that you not only get to meet the staff and say, right, I've got an interest in DevOps. In DevOps, I know, for example, a couple of technologies that I've been working on, and that puts into my last point down here on this sheet here about Git repos, where you can say, look, I've got this Git repo. I'm thinking about using technologies like Python and Kubernetes. What's the sort of project that you can give me that I can then show you to try and get a position here on a graduate scheme or even on a permanent basis? So now that comes into your favor. How cool is that? Like, you can now say to these recruiters, I've got a GitHub repo and this is what I did. I didn't just sit at home wasting time playing video games. Okay, when you come out of university, maybe you're playing video games. But what I'm saying is, like, you're not really wasting time. You're thinking to yourself, look, I need to get a job. I need to get a salary. Right, I'm an adult now. I haven't got time to waste. Give yourself that edge, man. If you're a gal, same thing. Give yourself that edge. So, that's the sort of thing that you can look for. And maybe even have a look at some YouTube videos. Like, I'm so glad I re-recorded this because I've got some new ideas now. This is actually my second take on this. Like, YouTube videos. Yeah, I mean, have a look at some YouTube videos. See if there's some tutorials out online that could get your kind of juices flowing. They may not be the best, right? You're still learning, right? You're still learning at this age, at this time, this space, this age, right? And even if you're a bit older as well, YouTube videos can really help you to solidify your understanding. There's some great ones on YouTube. For example, if you're learning Kubernetes, there's a person on YouTube called, I'm just trying to remember his name now. Killer Coder. He's the person that does Killer Coder. And he does some YouTube. I think he does some YouTube challenges on Kubernetes, but he's really, really good for a certification. And there's even one called Tech Bold and Nana, which I think is really, really good as well. She goes through some great detail on things like Python, things like Kubernetes, for example. Really highly recommend you check her out. And there's some other really good ones here as well. I think there's called That DevOps Guy. Really, really good one as well to have a look at. So yeah, have a look at them. See what you think. There's even Sentex as well for things like Python. He goes into some really good detail about things like artificial intelligence, and even made a video on things like GTA with artificial intelligence, right? So if you play video games, right? So if you play video games like GTA, you can apply that same enthusiasm that you have for GTA with things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. I mean, how cool is that? Like, you can have fun, right, by playing the video games and teaching a machine to play the game for you as you sleep. Like, now if you're a grinder in GTA, I mean, that's a dream come true, right? You don't have to sit down and get logged out of the game. You sit there, have the artificial intelligence, machine learning work for you, rather than, and go to sleep and get a good night's rest, and then in the morning you've got like 2 million in your account in Grand Theft Auto Online. I mean, there you go, right? How cool is that? So yeah, yeah. I mean, the possibilities are pretty much endless. Like, it's just crazy the kind of things that happen. So yeah, I mean, have a look at some of their articles as well on the website. So like, if you go to ThoughtWorks, um, yeah, let's get rid of that. That's my loop deck. It's not working at the moment, and I need to figure out why. But yeah, and here's some of the other recordings I was talking about as well. Oh dear. Right. Okay. My desktop, like, because I'm a Mercedes fan, so there you go. So yeah, there's ones, for example, like ThoughtWorks Technology Radar is a really good one. So let's go to ThoughtWorks Technology Radar. Right, ThoughtWorks Tech Radar. There we go. I got it in the end. So ThoughtWorks Tech Radar is a really good resource that you can have to figure out kind of the latest technologies which are coming into the market and ones which are emerging. So this will help you to understand kind of, what are the sort of tools that people are looking for and invested in at this point in time. Remember, this is volume 26. So volume 26 will become volume 27 later. So you've got to keep that in the back of your mind that, this is going to change because it's technology, it changes. So you've got things like Azure pipeline templates, for example. So maybe that's something that you could have a look at and express value into these companies which are looking for these technologies. Circle CI, for example. Google BigQuery ML. That's one that we use at my workplace. We use that to create dashboards, and I think we're even going to be using that to do some sort of machine learning in the future. We haven't quite got there yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be something that is going to be more popular in the coming years and months. Temporal, I'm not sure what that one does, but sounds cool. And you can even see some kind of the things that companies are adopting. Test containers, for example, to do testing of code locally through the shift left method. Swift UI. TFSec. Now, especially where I'm working, we are utilizing a tool which is similar to TFSec, but you can integrate it into things like Azure DevOps pipelines, for example, which is something that I'm working on myself in my own time. So you could use these kind of indicators to understand kind of the market in general, and it will give you a good idea as well as to kind of what you should focus on in terms of getting that role. And even have a look at some of the job specs as well to kind of just get an idea, a sense of the market. And that goes back to one of my other points of meetups. So meetups, they give you a really good sense of what the market is like in terms of technology and what the kind of people are within your field. So in the DevOps space, a couple of good mentions is Xiao Hong's Cloud Native London. A really, really good one. It's seen by a lot of people internationally as well. And it's online. And now it's back in person as well. So it's definitely one that you should check out. Another one is London DevOps by Cluent. I think his name's Cluent something, but I don't remember his last name. But it's definitely, if you're in the London region, definitely check it out. There are also meetups which happen kind of outside of London. I'm sure there's one for DevOps and for other different fields as well. I know there's one, for example, in London called the London Gophers, which is the London Golang meetup. So yeah, if you're into your Golang, if you're into that sort of thing, yeah, have a look at them. See where it takes you. You never know. You might find the recruiter or a senior engineer that has had that experience. Those kind of connections can be valuable for you in terms of getting the role that you really want and desire. I know, for example, for myself, that I've gone into these meetups and found quite a lot of senior level engineers or contractors that explain to me kind of the market. For example, with Kafka, I know that's coming into a lot of organizations now and what their experiences are with it. With things like IR35, if you're doing contracting work or if you're thinking of going into contracting work, these sort of experiences will allow you to understand the market and even give you an advantage over the competition who is applying for the same role. So really, really important. Other things that you can have a look at as well are certifications. Very, very important, I think, to give you that edge, and it will also increase your salary as well over time. Once you've got that experience, you can say, okay, look, I got this Kubernetes certificate. I personally have a couple of Kubernetes certificates. I've got the CKA and the CCAD. I'm going in for my CKS later on in the year, and you can join me on that journey as well. I'll create some videos so that way you can get stuck in. We can also have a look at how Kubernetes is created in from an on-premise experience, and which I'll show you. I'll show you that because I have some code which relates onto that. From an on-premise experience to the cloud, which is pretty beautiful when you think about it, because I've got these things, right? I've got switches like this, right? This is one of my kind of more I've got switches like this. So this is one of the spare ones which I've got. This is the Cisco. Well, it says Cisco. It's not really a Cisco. It's a Linksys SRW 2016. Right, so that's a Linksys SRW 2016. Pretty good switch, but it's SBS switch. Sorry, It's a small business switch. There we go, small business switch, and that switch essentially is 1 gig. I think it's 16 or 32 ports. Got VLAN support. What else does it have? VLAN support, SFP support. It's got. Yeah, generally those are the two main ones. Maybe it's got to be a bit of 802.3 AD, which is link aggregation. STP as well, I think it's got as well. But yeah, it's unmanaged switch, so it runs some sort of kind of iOS software. But I digress. But it leads me on to a really good point, which is that if you have multiple interests, you can combine them. Let me repeat that. If you have multiple interests, you can combine them. Now, what I mean by that is that I have, I like networking, and I really do want to get kind of like a job which encompasses networking and DevOps, right? So if you're a recruiter who's listening out there to these videos, let me know, because I want to do something in that space and have a look in more detail as to kind of what I could do to combine my DevOps skills and my networking skills. And at the moment, the only thing that seems to spring to mind is something called net DevOps. It's a new term which has been in America for some time, but not necessarily in Britain, okay, or in London or wherever. But essentially, what I'm saying is that if you have more than one hobby and you want to make money out of it, go for it. Apply for it. See how far you get. You may be successful. You may need to work a little bit harder, but yeah, definitely go for it. In terms of the certification route, I can see that there's 7 kind of different certifications that I've listed here in my previous shoot, right? So we've got, let's just make the spelling a bit better because I realize it's not the best. There we go. That's actually one word. Okay, there we go. So I realize that there's 7 here, but don't be afraid, because remember, as you've just come out of college or university, you've got a bit of time on your hands, because at the moment there are few employers which will take you for the role which you want, which means that you have to start from a pretty bad position. Now, for me, I was not that lucky. I was kind of one of those people that didn't get the job that they wanted straight away. Yeah, in fact, I'm not sure if I ever did. Right, because I like networking. I should have probably become a network engineer. I tried my Cisco CCNA. I didn't pass it. And I want to go again. I do want to go again at some point and do my CCNA, but I need time for that. Right, with all this other stuff that's going on, it's very difficult. And it's an annoying excuse, because I do want to do it. And I need to put time in for that. So you got to make sure that you've got some time to do these certificates. You got to make sure that you balance it out with good mental health as well, right? Good mental health will help you a lot, because you're on the screen for between 8 to 10 hours sometimes, depending on what you do, right? And when you're on the screen for 8 to 10 hours, that can be quite painful for mental health, right? So I find myself personally wanting to go away from the screen for about 10-15 minutes and then coming back to it, because when we work, we don't necessarily do the work that we find interesting. So we could be doing some Python code, which is pretty good, and then after a minute, like you're going on YouTube, you're going on Spotify, you're going on to go and see your emails, these sort of things, right? Which kind of give you that sense of dopamine, but you don't really need that sense of dopamine. You just need to work. So what I would recommend, like, is stuff like meditation, go out on a walk, that sort of thing, and that really helps. It's helped me a lot. I've started doing meditation for about three weeks now, and I can see the benefit. Like, I'm more focused, I've got more drive, not necessarily more energy, but it's given me, that sense of kind of being present within the moment, trying to connect with people more. So it just gives you that idea of kind of how to sort of be mentally prepared for the day. It doesn't matter if it's like doing certifications or the job, but just in life in general. Okay, so if you're going to take anything away from this, this video, it's going to be that. Take that one away, even if it's just for 10-20 minutes. Just that you watched this video or looked at this video, just take that into account. Okay, so yeah, there's 7 of them, but you can space them out. So what I would say for the certification exams, the best way to do it is try and get competent at it and then take it. Right? So you book your exam, be competent, then take it, so that way you're relaxed. But if you set the target a bit too kind of naively, in the sense that you think that you're ready but you're not, then that's going to cause trouble, because now you've kind of dejected yourself, you feel bad, and now you think, oh, okay, I can't do this. No, you can do this. You can do this, and if you have the will, you will do it. Right? All you got to remember is that the failure that happened in that test wasn't a failure. Okay? The failure that happened in that test was not a failure. You gain knowledge. You just don't have the piece of paper that says that you passed it. Yeah? You gained the knowledge. You understood what was on that piece of paper to a point that you got a mark. Now, all you have to do is just train that little bit extra. Do the practical labs. Yeah? So don't think about the theory so much. Like Terraform, for example, is a theoretical exam, but there's a reliance on practicality in order to pass it. Yeah? So keep trying, keep going for it, right? And you'll get it. Yeah? So don't feel disheartened. It's just a stepping, right? Failure is a stepping stone to success. So keep trying, right? You got this. So I know that there's a lot on here, but take your time with it. You don't have to do all of them. Just do the ones which they, well, not they, but what I mean by that is do the ones which the companies that you are applying for see the most interest and potential in. And a lot of companies will actually share the same values in terms of the technology stack, because they use the same technology stack. So don't feel disheartened. You're still learning. You still got some time. Which leads me on to the next point about meetups, because they're awesome and you should go, is that you can participate in them and show a genuine interest. So, for example, if you go to Cheryl Hong's Cloud Native London, she always asks, like, do you want to go and do a PowerPoint presentation, that sort of thing. And for me, I've never found anything interesting enough to really say, because it's quite an in-depth meetup, except for one thing, which is container CSI. So I think maybe I'll do a video. I'll do a video on CSI. Yeah, I think I should do a video on CSI, which is Kubernetes container storage interface, because I've done some sort of work around it, and it's pretty interesting, I think. And if you're a DevOps engineer in 2022, it may be interesting for you as well. And I'm planning to release some source code, and I just never got around to it. So I'm going to do that. I will do it. I just need a little time, because I'm working on some stuff with my dad right now with the website. And I've got some stuff that I need to do kind of pretty sharpish in order to get that done. And it takes a lot of time for me, unfortunately, and I don't have another engineer, so sadly it's just me. So stay tuned. It will get done, I promise. So Uh, that's one thing that you could do. You could also ask questions at the meetup to show a genuine interest. And if there's a recruiter in the hall, which there usually is for the company, then it shows your enthusiasm. It shows that you've impressed these engineers enough to say, look, I actually know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm doing, and to the extent that you can, because you've got some certifications under your belt now, and that you can engage in the conversations that these engineers are telling you about. Right? Which is pretty beautiful when you think about it, because not a lot of people, right, are able to get to that level. So it helps. So I think we discussed the technology radar. So read books. Yeah, read books. So maybe thinking, oh, okay, why do I need, like, oh, yeah, so maybe thinking to yourself something like this, right? Why do I need to read books? I have the internet for that. I work with the internet. Like, okay, yes, you do. You work with the internet. Well done. The thing is, though, right? The thing is, though, these books have got information in them as well, right? This one, for example, from Keith Morris, is Infrastructure as Code, and it talks about how you can structure your code so that way it's most beneficial, as far as I understand it. In fact, let me read the blurb at the back. So it's things like it says examine the pitfalls that organizations fall into when adopting the new generation of infrastructure technologies, which is what the book focuses on. Okay, and how you can work with things like software-defined networking, virtualization, cloud, containerization, that sort of thing. And so it essentially kind of just gives you the idea of what you can do with infrastructure as code, essentially. So infrastructure as code is things like Terraform, Ansible, CloudFormation, for example, if you're using AWS, that sort of thing. Okay? So I hope that's given you some sort of idea. So that's one. The other one that I would say as well is the DevOps Handbook, which is this one. Now this one I've read a little bit more about. Let's get that into a shot, shall we? There we go. The DevOps Handbook, and this is by Gene Kim, Jez Humble, Patrick DeBoss. You know what, I'll leave the link in the description below, but essentially it's Patrick Debois. I don't know how you pronounce that, but yeah. John Willis. Okay, so that's called the DevOps Handbook. I'll put that there, and that's the one that gives you some information around how to kind of look at software in the sense of manufacturing. So in software, what happens is that you go through a cycle called the Agile cycle. There's 12 principles, which have been kind of iterated via ThoughtWorks. And from there, it gives you the idea of kind of how you should look at the code as cattle rather than pets. And that idea is essentially that the code is immutable and you can do kind of almost whatever you want with the code. So that way it kind of scales up and down very quickly, that sort of thing. Okay? So that's another one. The other one, which a lot of people have been recommending, is called Accelerate. And this is kind of a book which, it's a book by Martin Fowler and Courtney Kistler. And I believe Martin Fowler was on YouTube, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check that. I'm not sure about that. I think Martin Fowler's on YouTube. I think he has a YouTube channel. Martin Fowler. Okay. He kind of is in the continuous delivery program with another ThoughtWorks engineer. In fact, I can leave that at the bottom of the video. I think this might be quite interesting to see from continuous delivery. From two ThoughtWorks engineers, essentially, or ex-ThoughtWorks engineers. But essentially, this book is essentially looking at software principles in a scientific manner. And that's recommended by ThoughtWorks themselves. They've recommended it to kind of have a look at, to it says building and scaling high performing technology operations. Not too sure what that means, but there we go. But that's another one that you could read. Yeah. So that's the sort of thing that you could say, oh, look, I've read these books. They're pretty helpful. I've kind of gone into it in a little bit more detail. That sort of thing. So what else could you do? Well, you could get a laboratory set up. So, for example, you could set up your own home lab, which is with the switch and a couple of servers that you could get online. That's always useful because you can do a lot of experimentation with that. Geek out with some of the staff members as well to say, look, I've set up a Kubernetes cluster with a couple of Raspberry Pis. That's pretty good, especially in DevOps, because you can say, right, okay, I've learned a little bit about it on premises. I've learned how to do it in AKS. I've learned how to do it in EKS. I've learned how to do it in GKE, for example. And it gives you brownie points because now you can say, look, I've got a GitHub repo and this is what I've done, right? I've got a GitHub repo and I've added something like a Lambda function in to my Terraform code in order to have it on AWS or an Azure function, for example. Same thing. Same thing, different way of doing it. But now you can say, look, I've got the evidence to back up this role that I'm applying for. That's what that demonstrates. And you can demonstrate that work as well through a YouTube video. So you can say, look, here's the work that I've done. Here's how it works. Let me know what you think. It doesn't necessarily have to be the greatest video of all time, but it certainly helps to have that within your arsenal when applying for a job. Yeah, of course, speak to other engineers as well who are there at the meetups, who are part of the company. Because one of the things that you have to bear in mind with meetups is that in certain meetups you'll find a lot of recruiters, and these recruiters kind of they almost they're very charming, so they almost come off as seductive, right? They almost come off as seductive, and generally these type of recruiters are female, but you can get male ones as well. But generally, in my experience, they come across as female, and these other recruiters who go to the meetup are kind of in the middle. They're not working with the company. So, for example, if you go to a company meetup, they won't be working for that specific company. There'll be different recruiters, and these recruiters that I've kind of come in contact with, they generally don't have your they come across as not having your best interests at heart. Now, what I mean by that is that when you're a student, you can get easily sucked into applying for different recruitment companies, and they'll just say, oh, we've got a job here, we've got a job there, and all this kind of thing. Now, the thing that you have to remember is when you're a student, they're working on commission. Most of these recruitment companies and recruiters that you come in contact with, they're after commission. So what happens is that they want to put you in at the best rate possible so that way they get a rebate back from it. But you may not necessarily like the role because you don't know much about the company yourself because you haven't interacted with the staff. That's the big problem. So what I would say is, and I keep reiterating this point, talk to the staff at the company that you want to apply for by the means of the meetup. Essentially, that's the best way to do it, because otherwise you can be I'm trying to find a better word for this, but you could be tricked into a role that you didn't really want in the first place, because a lot of the time these recruiters who do the middle things, and they've said it personally to me. They don't understand the technology stack well enough to employ you into a role. They go on your word. And that's some of the reasons why you don't get a call back from these companies, because the recruiters haven't been able to articulate your understanding of the technology stack. They've just said, oh, look, you've got this and you've got that. Right? Which for me, personally, I think recruiters need to do a better job of that. They really do, because they need to be able to understand the technology stack in order to employ the right person for the role, because at the end of the day, they're getting berated by the companies to say, look, we need X, we need Y. Why on earth are you getting me a person? What it's kind of like this. Why are you getting me a person that says that they know Kubernetes but doesn't have anything on their CV to say that they have it? Well, when we said that this was an essential skill. So that's the thing. You want to also bear in mind when talking to these kind of recruiters is, and even for company ones, is what's the company dynamic like? Do they have a good work ethic? Is the manager communicating with their staff to state things clearly and articulating that? And that's one of the things that I don't see a lot of people doing. Even experienced engineers don't do that. They don't think in that manner because they're not thinking of the role in its entirety. You see, and what you'll learn is when you become a more seasoned engineer, you'll start thinking about these things because that's the stuff that kind of becomes enjoyable. Is articulating a problem with your fellow engineers to solve it, and that can be through something like a SIG, or that could be through just general discussion. And that's one of the beautiful things about DevOps that I sorely miss, is that sense of collaboration to solve a problem. It doesn't have to be your problem. It could be another engineer's problem, but you're the one that could come up with that idea to say, look, if it's Istio, for example, this is one that I had at my workplace. They were trying to deploy Istio, and I turned around and said, well, you could do it with Terraform, put it in as a provider with Helm, and what you could do is you could loop around all of these other things in Terraform, so that it installs things like Kiali, for example. So Kiali is a service mesh technology whereby you can see the traffic that goes from one pod to another, and then you can see what happens in the middle. So if you think about a network, it's essentially saying, if you think about a road, think about a road in the sense of like you want to go from, let's say, Birmingham to London, right? So you go through the M1, the M25, or that sort of thing, and you could think, and Kiali will say, oh, the M1's kind of really busy today. So if you're working for the highways agency, one of the things that you could do is traffic calming measures. So that way the cars are traveling at a slower speed, but you still get the level of service that you require. And that's the sort of thing that happens in Kiali. It shows you the level of traffic which is going through, the level of communication, what's high, what needs a bit of tweaking, so that way you can do the debugging on figuring out why the level of communication is high between two pods. Okay? So you could be that person that does that. So don't be afraid to take risks as well when you get the job that you're passionate about, because that will really help you. Yeah, I think that covers most of my points really. So yeah, do the hard work, and it will pay off. Essentially, that's what it is. That's really what it is. Yeah, and look after your mental health as well. Stay positive, stay mindful, and yeah, that's it. That's all I have for you today. Stay tuned. We'll meet again.